Hello, it's me again. It is September the 1st, 2024. The Basic Fantasy Adventure Binge 2024 at FallCon and the Great River Film Festival at the Euclid Lindsay Center, Quincy, Illinois, is over for this year. I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot to talk about the event. This is kind of a wrap-up and a thank you. And I'm going to try to organize this probably in post because I don't think I'm going to be able to organize my thoughts adequately before that. So I apologize if it seems a little jumpy, but we'll make do with what I've got in my head at this point. I really do want to get things recorded now while they're still fresh. First of all, I need to thank Ray Davis and Tammy Davis and Mike Stanbridge and all the members of the Great River Gaming Guild, who were responsible for putting on FallCon and for allowing me to basically take over their role-playing section. For 2 days, Friday and Saturday, out of the 4-day convention, which is still going on today, we had half the tables basically taken up in that section. And as I say, it was absolutely amazing. I've never been part of anything like that before. I'll be honest, folks, I did not know if the binge format would work. And I know from some comments that I've seen today on social media that there were several people who weren't sure that the binge format would work, but they came anyway. And so far, everybody I've seen comment on it has been positive. One person confirmed that he would definitely be back next year, so this is good. I'm happy with that. We have been asked to do it again next year at FallCon, which will probably be on Labor Day weekend. I don't really know for sure. It's far too early, as I say, their convention is still going on right now. Far too early to say if they'll keep the same schedule. This was a change this year, so they may change it again next year. I don't know. But again, I want to thank Ray and Mike and Tammy and the Great River Gaming Guild for their support in doing this, for running this convention, doing such a good job of it, so I didn't have to be involved in any more than just keeping my event going. It was fantastic to be able to do that. I need to thank my volunteer game masters, Cody Drabenstadt, Brian Scalise, Tim Kuhn, and Al Vetter. I will point out these guys were not just volunteers, and they were not just good volunteers. They are my friends. Cody Drabenstadt is a member of my in-person group. He was there with his wife, Emily, who played. Brian Scalise and Tim Kuhn are in my online group that I formed after a certain pandemic a few years ago. So we've known each other for several years and have gamed together basically almost weekly for all that time. And Al Vetter has been a member of the Basic Fantasy Project for a long time. He is an editor. He and I had not actually played the game together until this weekend, but he's been a member of the project for a long time. It was absolutely amazing to sit down with a colleague that I've worked with, who I had never met in person before, and game, and then go out and eat a little bit. It was utterly amazing. Was it perfect? No. What is ever perfect? There were editing errors, discrepancies between chapters that shouldn't have been there. I was writing the adventure at the last possible moment on some of it. I tried to start early enough, but playtesting and editing was difficult because of the format. The playtesting had to be done in such a way that the volunteer GMs didn't actually see any chapters or get any hints that they weren't supposed to have, because the volunteer GMs each got to play a chapter, with me as the game master, and they played, and then they ran their tables for the rest of the event. So I ran table 1 and table 2 on Friday, table 3 and table 4 on Saturday. And again, it was absolutely beyond my anticipation. Because there were errors and there were issues, there were things that had to be fixed on the fly. I got to give my volunteer GMs kudos. Every one of them had to make up for some deficiency in the hastily assembled adventures that I had written. And I think in the end, everything came out great. I think all the players had a good time. So, again, I want to thank them. I want to thank everyone who came out to play, whether they were people that I knew or people I'd never met before. There were some of them who were people I knew to some degree or another, anywhere from vaguely to maybe well on our forum or on our social media. But I had, again, never met in person, and there were a good number of people that I did know from previous experience, had actually met and so forth, who were there. Among other things, my daughter, my son-in-law, my daughter's friends, daughter and son-in-law's friends came and played, so there were 4 of them. So the game ran from people in my age group, I am nearing 60, all the way down to young people in their 20s, and I think that's great. And I think everyone had a good time. There were definitely some stories to tell. And maybe I'll tell a few of them here. Let me see what comes to mind. Let's go back to front. The very end of the entire story of this 4-part adventure that everyone participated in involves taking an object, the MacGuffin, as it were, a scroll with a miracle on it, taking it back into the dungeon from the first chapter, taking it to the rift in space and time that was allowing the alien monsters, the Nazgûrians, to invade the world, and use the miracle to close the rift, because the players were told in a previous chapter, in one way or another, that no mortal power could close the rift, so it had to be closed by something divine. And they had already gone through, I'll talk about this, I said I'm going to be out of order. They'd already gone through an adventure to get the scroll and so forth. They entered the room, and what happened next? I mean, they entered the dungeon first and then the room. One party entering the dungeon made use of a passwall scroll that was seated in the adventure to see what they would do with it. There were several magic items that could be found during the course of the adventure, and a couple that were actually just given to the players as initial equipment that could shortcut certain parts of the adventures, that there were possibilities that they could bypass certain difficulties if they used these devices properly. And I had expected the scroll with passwall on it to be used to open a hole in the literal tower on top of the rock where the rift was, and they would bypass the entire dungeon to close it. Of course, the pass wall wouldn't last long enough, and they would have to leave the hard way, going back through a dungeon that had been restocked since they were last there and fighting monsters they knew nothing about. But they would at least arrive at the rift fully prepared. That's how I expected it to be used. The only group that used it to bypass an internal part of the dungeon and shorten the trip to the tower, which is absolutely fine. They could certainly take any route that they wanted to get there. But I was, again, not expecting. It's one of the things I love about old school games. You never know what's going to happen. That group successfully closed the portal, but they had a substantial fight in escaping. They did succeed in escaping. They had a substantial fight in doing so. Another table succeeded in closing the rift, but the game master, this was Cody at table 1, was keeping track of time according to what I had written in the adventure, and they enacted the scroll on the same round that the rift should have been opening randomly anyway. So he went ahead with the thunder and sound effects and so forth and rolled a random encounter check and got an encounter and ended up sending 7 spider wolves into the room. Spider wolves are pretty tough. The players had already fought a bunch of monsters getting to that point, fought their way through the dungeon to get there because they hadn't taken a significant shortcut. So they were not in optimal condition. They did some tricky business to get out of the room, and in the end, 2 characters who were thieves just ran from the room and managed to run away, outran the monsters, and escaped. The rest of the members eventually died. So that whole party was wiped out. But they had done what needed to be done to end the threat permanently. So that still was a win, if we can say there was a win, because it wasn't a tournament or a competition of any sort. But that was a win for them. And I was proud of them. That was pretty cool. And in fact, my daughter, playing the part of Borin the dwarf, actually led the spider wolves away from the rest of the party in hopes of allowing them to escape. So that was pretty cool also. I like that. Another table had a similar situation with closing the gate and then having to fight their way, the rift, and then having to fight their way out, but I don't think the fighting was as difficult for them. I'm not sure. I ran table 4 for that, obviously, and at table 4, as the cleric in the party was preparing to read the scroll and enact the miracle, they literally were on a staircase before the next to last room, hadn't even stepped into the next to last room, and they're like, oh, what are we going to ask for with this miracle? Because a miracle works like a wish, except that instead of being twisted to screw you over, miracles may be bent to serve the desires, the needs, the goals of the God granting the miracle. So the miracles will tend to do whatever makes that God happiest. In this case, they were pretty sure that the miracle was going to work out for them. The king god of the old pantheon would have not cared for his world being invaded by alien monsters, so they believed that they had a good shot at the miracle going right. And they did. But as she was writing down what she was going to say, making very careful plans what she was going to say, another player, who happened to be the husband of the player, suggested, when she got to the part about closing the rift, he said, and banish the invaders. And so she added that to the miracle. And as a consequence, they cakewalked out of the dungeon, because the dungeon was entirely Nazgorians at that point, so they were all gone. The miracle was granted the way she requested it. The rift closed, the monsters were eliminated from the world, and they were left safely walking out. Two groups faced with a tiger squid in that scene just before they closed the rift actually used a wand of polymorph taken away from some monsters in an earlier chapter, and successfully turned the tiger squid, which has pretty good saving throws, especially against wands, but they successfully turned the tiger squid into a turtle in the case of table 4, or a chicken in the case of table 1. And I was impressed with that too. Of course, I'm the one that rolled the monster saving throw and got a 4, so it didn't make it save. But that was just amazing. The whole situation. It played out somewhat differently at every table, but it was a complete range from no problem leaving to only 2 people got out, with the other 2 being running battles to escape. It was absolutely amazing. I'll go backwards. The 3rd chapter involved visiting an abbey and asking for divine assistance to close the rift. The abbot tells them he can't help them. He has no such power, because he really doesn't. He's not that powerful, not that high level of a cleric that he could begin to think about closing a rift with anything he could do or anything he could call upon the gods for. What he didn't know, and what they didn't know, is that there's a treasure room in the dungeon containing things that an elf king had deposited at the abbey like 1,000 years ago, and the room itself had been long forgotten. One of the monks in the monastery was in fact a thief, hiding out from, well, everybody, because he'd made his guildmaster angry enough at him to order his execution, and he had made nobles in his home city angry at him for stealing valuable items. Of course, the reason the guildmaster was angry was because he heard about the valuable items being stolen and realized he hadn't gotten his cut. So this is the reason. So the Parax, the thief, becomes oblate Paractus of the abbey. But he's not really a committed monk, and he doesn't want to do the work that monks have to do and so forth. And while he is in the catacombs, actually the cellars, looking for something he was sent down to retrieve, he discovers the secret door, because he's goofing off. And having discovered the secret door, he also discovers he can't get it open. It's rusty, so it takes him a few days to successfully lube it up enough to open it. And of course, he opens it at the time the players are having supper with the abbot and his monks. And this leads to the thief then walking into the room and finding the treasure. Well, the first thing he finds, practically first thing he sees, is a large mirror with a cloth over it, and he immediately recognizes the probability that that is a dangerous mirror, and furthermore recognizes if it's not dangerous, it might be valuable, but it's going to be hard to smuggle out of the Abbey. So it's not valuable to him, and it probably is dangerous. He chooses to break it. It's a mirror of life trapping, and it's holding an entire clan of hivelings, because hivelings all have one mind. They function as one creature. They were drawn in as one creature by the mirror of life trapping. He shatters the mirror. They're released. Hivelings are mean-spirited little devils. They can detect magic items and can activate almost anything other than scrolls. If they can physically pick it up and wield it, they can probably use it. And they very quickly picked up other treasure items from the room, like a Horn of Doom and a Wand of Polymorph. And while they were doing that, the thief was running away and hiding and spiking himself into a room. The encounter with the hivelings is interesting, because since hivelings function as a single creature, as long as the entire clan has more, they share their hit points. As long as the entire clan has more hit points than they have individuals, none of them die. They don't even look badly injured at first. You have to keep beating on them before you can even see that you've hurt them. This was disheartening at all 4 tables, which is exactly what's supposed to happen. They're supposed to be tough little devils, and that's what they were. Eventually, every party managed to defeat them. The hivelings never fail a morale check until their numbers are 5 or fewer, because their morale is 2 times their number of living individuals in the colony. So 5 individuals has a morale of 10, which could fail, but 6 individuals has a morale of 12 and will not. All but one of the groups, all the groups failed their morale, because all the groups were finally reduced to the point where they started to fall, and that meant that they were now possible to get down where they would fail a morale check. They all did fail a morale check. At table 4, the hivelings failed a morale check, and in the same round, before they could take action, or actually because they'd already taken action because their initiative's very fast, they had to wait till the next round. Before they could take any further action, let's put it that way, they were all killed. So much damage was inflicted in the last one hit that it literally just knocked them all down throughout the dungeon. The other groups, that was table 3, I'm sorry. The other tables, the hivelings managed to run away with 1 or 2 living members, one of whom had the Horn of Doom, and being as that they were in a catacomb, they blew the horn and a bunch of skeletons rose up and the players had to fight them. Player characters are 4th level, the skeletons are 1-hit die, and they fall fairly easily as opposed to the hivelings, which hadn't been up to that point, but it was a little extra problem for them to solve. And they all solved it in their own way, except table 3, which didn't have to do that, because they actually managed to inflict so much damage in one round, right as the hivelings were down to their limit, that they knocked out the entire colony. I was pleased at the level of play I saw. I was pleased at the level of old school understanding that I saw. Understanding that sometimes you need to run away. Understanding that sometimes you're fighting something that's too tough for you. A good grasp of tactical movement on the part of many of the players. I find a lot of people don't understand tactical movement very well. If they play more modern games where tactical movement is hit or miss. And honestly, tactical movement is hit or miss in a lot of old school games too, but we try to take it kind of seriously, and I saw a lot of good movement. I was particularly impressed with the table 4 facing some frogmen in the rock, where one of the players, the one playing the fighter with the best armor class, basically stepped forward in a relatively narrow space and blocked the advance of the frogmen, but left room for the archers to shoot past them on either side. And when the archers said, "But we'd be shooting at opponents that are engaged with you, we might hit you," he said, "I don't care." He said, "Shoot them anyway." And that was a reasonable approach. He already knew the frogman's armor class was significantly lower than his. The odds that they would miss the frogman and then hit him was relatively low. So he took a risk on it, and it paid off. They defeated the frogmen. In fact, the frogmen routed, which doesn't happen very often, and they shot the last one just as it was about to leave the room. It was it was so much fun to watch everybody having a good time. It was so good to see the players who largely had never met, who are operating with different levels of experience as players, either as players of Basic Fantasy or as players of role-playing games in general. I know we had one gal there who had very, very little experience playing. She did just fine. She did wonderfully. We had a bunch of people there who were veteran players like me. I can't say I'm a veteran player. I'm more of a veteran GM, but people who'd been doing it for decades. And we had a good mix of all that, and it still went fantastic. I'm confident a good time was had by everyone. I know a good time was had by me. So one more time, thank you, Ray, Tammy, Mike, and everybody in the Great River Gaming Guild, even if I can't remember all your names, who was involved in FallCon and made it come off as well as it did. Thank you to my volunteer GMs, Cody, Brian, Tim, and Al, for coming out and making this work for us. Flying from opposite coasts in the case of Brian and Tim. That just floors me. That just astonishes me. Thank you to all the players, all the participants, everyone who played, everyone who helped me set up and pick up, everybody who just came along and had me sign their books. I was so happy to be able to do that for everybody. Not going to talk about it too much, but we did give away 7 prototype boxed sets. They are, at the moment, the only Basic Fantasy boxed sets in the world. That are legitimately made by me, produced by me, done as part of the Basic Fantasy project. Each volunteer GM got one, first of all. Kudos to Augie Dog Days, and I cannot think of his name. I'd have to look it up. The guy who, on the Discord, talked me into running this whole thing. He didn't suggest the binge. He didn't suggest taking over somebody else's convention. He simply suggested the idea that a lot of other people had suggested about doing a Basic Fantasy convention, but he did it at the right moment, in the right way, got my attention, got me thinking about it, and made me realize what I needed to do to pull this off, because I'm sorry folks, I'm not qualified to run a convention. I know I'm not. I don't know anything about doing it. If I ran a whole convention, there's no way I could run an event. I've seen how much work goes into it. It's just not something that I can expect to accomplish. But then I remembered that FallCon usually has plenty of table space available. That's how that has worked out in the past. I was expecting FallCon to still take place at the formerly known as Quincy Mall, now the Quincy Town Center, as it had been over the last several years. When I contacted Ray, he said, well, we've moved both the time and the location, and combined with the Great River Film Festival, we're going to be using the Oakley Lindsay Center. The Oakley Lindsay Center was amazing. The only staff there I interacted with was the lady selling the food concessions. So I can't really say a lot about the people there or what they were like to work with. That'll have to be up to Ray to say if he's got a comment on the matter. But the place was perfect for our purposes. It was ideal for the convention. There was plenty of space. Everything was arranged nicely. They had a heck of a vendor area. I didn't spend much time there, but they had a heck of a vendor area with a lot of different vendors selling a lot of different very nerdy stuff. Stuff that I like. I just didn't really have the time to look at it like I might have liked to. But yeah, they just did an incredible job with the whole thing, and I was really happy to have been able to be there. But I presented it to Ray, and Ray's like, that sounds great. How many people do you think you're going to have? And I said, according to the way I've planned this out, I can't support more than 28 people. So I said it won't be more than 28. And I said I'm going to hope I could fill a table or two. Hope I can get up to maybe 14 people would be 2 tables. I said I'm hoping I can get up to that. I don't know if I will or not. We had 3 not full, but 3 tables up that were up to minimum for Friday, and enough extra people coming for Saturday that hadn't been able to make it Friday that we were able to fill out the full 4 tables. That was, I keep saying amazing. It was amazing. It was absolutely beyond my comprehension that it could even work, much less that it could work so well. And I owe it to everybody who participated for having made it work so well. Volunteer GMs thinking on their feet, players coming out to enjoy the game and being good to each other. It was just so absolutely wonderful. So, I may think of other stories later. I may add them to this video. I may post more videos later. I don't know. I may just post them on social media. And I invite anybody who participated who has a story they want to tell about their experiences. Hit us up on social media. Join our group on Facebook. Come to the forum and post it there. Or when we have the Discord, you're welcome to come out there also and talk about your experiences. I look forward to seeing what you all have to say. But, yeah. So, one of the things I told the players as they were leaving was to keep their character sheets. Hang on to their badges, where I stuck stickers on their badges with the name of the player, of the character they were playing. I said, you come back next year, you bring me your character sheet or your badge with your character name on it, I'll give you the same character, upgraded about 2 levels, and we're going to play some more binge. We're going to do the binge again. It's early. I mean, it is the day after I ran the event. So I'm going to sketch out my plan, which may not survive very long, for what I'm going to do for next year for the binge. Running one comprehensive adventure was pretty cool. No doubt, no lie, no argument. Running one continuous adventure was fantastic. But it was a little hard to coordinate some of the stuff. We did it. We did it. Thanks to my volunteer GMs, we were able to make the coordination work. We kept the story consistent enough, got them through. Everybody had a good time playing, but it was extra work. It didn't have to be. So my plan for Basic Fantasy Adventure Binge 2025, as of this moment, 24 hours after I was running the game, is to run 4 separate adventures, 4 separate short adventures, mini adventures or side quests, which is basically what we were running yesterday and the day before anyway. They were chained together. There was a sequence. But these will be just separate adventures. Each one will be, probably they'll all be dungeons, because dungeon adventures are just relatively easy to write. Dungeons or indoor environment adventures are easy to write, so that's probably what they'll be. But they will be 4 different adventures with maybe 4 different styles to them, featuring the heroes of Wolvenmere, the characters who played in the game before. I will have all the same pre-gens available. There were extras that weren't used, and then anybody who can't show up, after I verify they haven't showed up, their characters will be available also for whoever else wants to play. But I'm promising to make sure that everybody gets their same character back if they show up on time on the first day of 2025 binge. Or if they let me know in advance that they're not going to be able to be there until Saturday and show me that they're registered, in which case I'll reserve their characters for them until they get there to show me their credentials. So that's the plan for that. 4 separate adventures. This will have several advantages. Working with my volunteer GMs, and I have access to other people who might not be able to make the binge but who will be willing to playtest, we can playtest all 4 adventures separately. Still not give anything away to the volunteer GMs. They simply don't playtest the sessions that I expect them to play in. Simple. Not having them be chained together means there won't be any secrets I have to hide other than just the adventure itself. There won't be any concern of leaking of information to the GM that they might then know when they're a player, in which I don't expect them to cheat, but it's hard to not know something that you know. Hard to pretend you don't know it when you do know it. And I don't want to make them do that. So I've thought about this. I think this is the way to go. These player characters rather will be, well, after a year, probably vaguely familiar, but still familiar to the players. They will have upgraded magic and upgraded skills because of their increased levels and so forth. And we're just going to see where it goes from there. I've already begun to think about what happens in the next little while after the characters return from their mission and so forth. And the ones who died, the few who died, because relatively few characters did die, they'll be back. Whether they were raised from the dead or whether we just don't remember the story properly, it doesn't matter why. they will be back. They'll be available for those players to play for the next binge. This is what I'm looking at. This is where I'm at with this. We're going to do this again. This was so good. And I owe so many people for doing this, for making this work, for actually, you know, being there for me, being there for each other to run this game. It's nice to know that I wasn't wrong, that the binge format can work, that you can run an adventure in that style and it can work, and it can be fun to do that, to run a convention game, you know, like that. So yeah, I guess what I've got left to say is I hope to see you all next year. Thank you all so much.